So the Trump administration thought they had this all figured out, right? Apply enough pressure, threaten enough tariffs, and Canada will fold like a cheap suit. That's been the plan since the Orange Menace took office. Well, New Brunswick Premier Susan Holt just ended that assumption in one sentence. Her answer to how far Canada should go? Whatever it takes. And she's not alone.
Yeah, 1 year ago, Canadian leaders were trying to convince Washington that hurting Canada would also hurt Americans. Now, they are debating how much leverage to actually deploy and how fast Canada can build enough alternatives so that the threat becomes permanent, not just tactical.
The conversation has shifted, and today we're going to walk you through exactly what Canada is holding and why the cards in that hand are far stronger than most people realize. Ford already proved that this works. In 2025, Ontario briefly placed a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. It was suspended for negotiations, but did you notice what happened there? Washington paid attention immediately.
Now Ford is revisiting that option right now. He wants dollar-for-dollar response to the threatened 50% tariff, and electricity is sitting right there on the table. Whether he uses it or not is not the point here. The threat is enough, just like Trump.
And New Brunswick has a stronger hand than most people actually realize. They have electricity exports, nuclear power, an enormous oil refinery, direct energy connections with the northeastern United States, and major port infrastructure.
And there's one specific vulnerability that Trump doesn't want advertised. Northern Maine's electricity network is not fully connected to the rest of the American grid. New Brunswick plays a critical role in keeping power moving there. Replacing that supply would be possible, but it would not be quick, simple, or cheap.
And that's the leverage right there. And Holt just reminded Trump and his cronies that it can break at any time.
Now, we can't talk about energy without talking about oil, and this is where Canada's energy paradox becomes interesting. Because Canada's doing something that looks like a flat-out contradiction on paper. They've committed to cutting national emissions 40 to 45% below 2005 levels by 2030. But at the same time, Canadian oil production hit a record high in 2025 at 5 million barrels a day.
Now, the critics will call that a smoking gun of hypocrisy. And look, the criticism isn't crazy. It kind of looks like that. But Prime Minister Carney's administration has a specific argument for why those two numbers are compatible. And when you actually follow the logic, it's pretty hard to miss.
You cannot build a multi-billion-dollar green energy grid on good intentions alone. You need capital and you need time. Canada's biggest capital reserve right now is still underground in Alberta.
And what makes the strategy genuinely clever is the infrastructure design. The LNG terminals and pipelines being built right now, many are designed for dual use. The same routes carrying natural gas today can be repurposed to carry green hydrogen tomorrow.
So Canada is essentially pre-building the delivery system for a renewable energy empire funded by fossil fuel revenue. The road to net zero in Carney's framing is not a straight line, and I agree. It is a bridge built out of the very resources Canada is trying to move away from.
And there is hard evidence that it's working as a strategy. Germany's LNG deal with Canada was signed with a hydrogen-ready clause built directly into the contract. Most people miss that.
As everybody does these days, the European Commission approved Germany's contribution to the Canada-Germany Hydrogen Joint Funding System in January 2026. That's real money approved by real regulators.
Now, hydrogen tends to arrive wrapped in enough technical language to frighten away a normal person. So I'll give you the normal version. Electricity can be used to separate hydrogen from water. That hydrogen can help run industries such as steel, shipping, chemicals, and fertilizer production, where using ordinary batteries is often really hard. It can also be converted into something easier to transport, such as ammonia, and shipped across the Atlantic. Germany wants these fuels specifically to avoid rebuilding the energy vulnerability it had with Russia. Makes sense.
It does. For Atlantic Canada, it could create demand for wind power, ports, manufacturing, and hydrogen facilities. Newfoundland and Labrador, Nova Scotia, and New Brunswick, they all want a piece of that opportunity too.
So the question here is this: can Canada actually save the planet by selling more oil? I know it sounds absurd, right? But that's exactly the bet that Prime Minister Carney is making. And Germany and Japan, they're co-signing and signing on to that plan.
And this is also the part that gets almost no coverage in the mainstream media, so pay attention. The bypass is not a plan anymore. It's already running.
Yeah, Trans Mountain is operational. The expanded pipeline nearly triples capacity to the Pacific coast, 890,000 barrels a day. Alberta crude can now reach global markets directly without even touching the U.S.
LNG Canada started shipping liquefied natural gas from Kitimat in 2025, and that's a new export chain. Gas fields, pipelines, processing plants, indigenous partnerships, West Coast ports, all of that is live right now.
And here's the number that really matters. In April 2026, Canadian marine crude exports to Asia and Europe rose more than 46% compared to the previous year. Non-US exports more than double from 2025. For the first time in the Statistics Canada series, the growth in crude exports was driven by countries other than the United States.
That is the kicker for the Trump administration right there, Dave. The growth is coming from somewhere else other than the USA, so the plan is already in motion.
Japan locked in a comprehensive strategic partnership with Canada in March 2026. LNG, hydrogen, nuclear technology, carbon capture. Japan wants a stable supplier that is not Washington as well. Canada has everything that Japan wants in a trading partner. We're politically predictable and close to the Pacific shipping routes. And right now, predictability is the currency that middle powers are betting on. Canada can offer that right now. Washington, well, they've decided they can't.
Meanwhile, the United States is creating its own energy paradox. Trump says America is entering an age of energy dominance. He sounds like he's copying Carney. But his administration has been canceling and delaying many of the manufacturing, battery, wind, solar, hydrogen, green energy projects needed to meet rapidly growing electricity demand.
One recent analysis connected Trump's policies to almost $83 billion in delayed or canceled clean energy and manufacturing investments. Those projects were associated with more than 111,000 potential jobs. The administration has also admitted in court filings that billions in clean energy grants were canceled based on the politics of the states receiving them.
That kind of policy whiplash makes long-term investors very nervous, to say the least. An energy project may take 10 or 15 years to finance, to permit, and build. Companies cannot confidently plan when a project's survival depends on which political party won the state in the last election.
And here's what lands the hardest when you step back and look at the whole big picture unfolding here. The tariffs, they're designed to make Canada more dependent on the United States, more vulnerable, and easier to control.
Instead, they pushed provinces to strengthen internal trade. They accelerated energy grid coordination across the Maritime provinces. New Brunswick, Nova Scotia, and PEI, they just signed an agreement to coordinate long-term electricity planning, sharing generation, transmission, and grid management across the region.
Every alternative that Canada builds reduces Washington's ability to threaten Canada into submission. A province with one major customer, they've got no room to maneuver. A province connected to a stronger Canadian network, well, that has options. And right now, provinces are making those connections deliberately, and they're making them fast.
Now, the reality that gets lost in Trump's ego-driven trade strategy is that Canada and other countries have learned their lesson the hard way, and they're moving forward with a different strategy.
One that's not reversible. Once you build LNG terminals and sign 10-year contracts with Germany and Japan, once you coordinate maritime electricity grids, you don't unbuild that because another president is in office or the U.S. changes its tone suddenly. The writing is on the wall here, but they just refuse to acknowledge it. And that's what happens when ego blinds practicality.
So, Susan Holt's whatever it takes comment captures the new mood. Canadian leaders are no longer arguing over whether the country needs leverage. They are debating how much leverage to use and how quickly Canada can build enough alternatives to avoid needing the threat at all. Now, My thought is that Trump will keep escalating because he sees compromises as weakness and his base loves him talking strong. Every escalation will give Canada another reason to accelerate Pacific exports, Atlantic energy links, and partnerships with Europe and Asia.
Canada still has to deliver, though. We need projects completed, agreements turned into contracts, and export revenue invested in the next generation of energy. The opportunity here, it's enormous, but Canada can't defeat American chaos with Canadian paperwork.
So let's get on it! And let us know what you think. Should Canada put electricity, oil, and critical minerals on the table if the new American tariffs take effect?
Or is simply building alternative markets the stronger long-term response?
Let us know in the comments, and when you're down there, check out our pinned comment where you can find our merch store, our A-Team membership, the Facebook group links, and you can also check out the Substack, which is much spicier than what we can say on YouTube.
Also, don't forget to like, hype, and share this so other people can see how great Canada is doing and weigh in on the situation as well.
Thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Ciao for now.